Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, we are joined once again by Tim Mulligan. He is an author and he has a new graphic novel in addition to the one we already talked about. This one is very exciting. I have the data here. It's called Snitchland, and the early review describes it as Chernobyl meets the haunting of Hill House in this chilling graphic novel. And so we're very excited to learn more about it. I didn't necessarily get a whole press release on this one, so we're going in blind, folks. We're gonna find out from Tim what it's all about and what it was like to do this. So welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me back again. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. So why don't we start from the beginning? Why don't you tell us about Snitchland? What's this one about?
Yeah, I set out to write a trilogy about this place, which is a place that I'm from. It's a real place. It's a kind of a scary. My hometown. It's a home of a big nuclear cleanup. It's the home of the Hanford Nuclear Reactor. I thought it'd be fun to write a series of scary. I actually set out to write a series of scary plays, so kind of immersive experiences, which I did, and now I'm converting them each one by one into this trilogy of graphic novels. So the first one was called Witchland. That's one I talked to you about before. It kind of takes this couple and their daughter and puts them in this town as fish out of water, where they're working near this Hanford nuclear reactor cleanup. And things start going terribly wrong for this family. And it kind of involves maybe a witchcraft from a witch across the street, toxic, exposure to nuclear radiation and toxic waste, and things just go worse from there. So that came out in February, and now this is the direct sequel. It's called Snitchland. It came out 2 days ago, and it follows the same family, but they're dealing with the aftermath of pretty horrific loss and events that happened at in Witchland. And now it's kind of the tone has shifted from a kind of a funny, scary, cautionary tale about this dangerous place that's leaking radiation and has 52 million gallons of radiation, toxic waste buried in the ground. That was more of a scary play. It involved witches. This one I tried to write more of a thriller, kind of a whistleblower thriller. I researched all sorts of stories of folks who have brought to light safety concerns or environmental concerns, whatever, and alleged that all sorts of bad things happened to them. So I thought I would write a thriller in this one. And of course, I had to throw in some sort of supernatural element. So this is a pure, good old fashioned ghost story, where the ghosts of one of the family members who didn't make it through Witchland now is leading them through to get to the truth of what led to his demise. And so this is a ghost story set at a nuclear plant.
Well, that's fun. That's fun. Um, you know, is it a ghost or is it just the radiation?
Well, it's a good story. It's a good question. You'll see in this. I would posit that it's a ghost here, and this one, caused by the radiation. I'd put it that way. So, but I really tried to, this place has had decades of kind of, troubled history with radiation and people who've succumbed or got sick or whatever it might be. So I imagined a world where there's ghosts walking all around that town who may have befallen the same, fate. And so that's what I wrote about in this. I tried to write about in this story was all the ghosts of folks who didn't make it, helping this family get to the truth.
No, when I remember when I lived in the Seattle area, we had a radiation alarm um because of Hansford.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it kind of turned out to be nothing. They thought there was something, and they have these long tunnels sort of half buried underground where stuff
Yeah.
is stored.
Yes, they do.
And they had
Mm-hmm.
thought something was happening in there. And it was turned out to be nothing. But it was definitely sort of an odd thing. I think we were supposed to stay inside for a while and all this type of thing. And, the event, something happened. And so a lot of that stuff can be quite frightening. So I don't know if you find this, but I find anything to do with, and maybe it's the aesthetics of it. With nuclear power, nuclear energy, all that type of thing. There's a certain creepy vibe to the whole thing. Do you find that too?
Well, I might be a little jaded because I was born and raised there, and most of my family and friends live there, work there, worked out there. I put it this way: all of us who are from there, even though they may want, not want to admit it, know someone in their life who either got cancer or got sick, um, and either passed away or led to real serious health problems in their life. I know the government is trying to clean it up and fix it up and do the best they can, but it was just a way of life there, So I look back to my own family, my own friends, people that, and it's no secret, there was a class action lawsuit of thousands of people, the Downwinders lawsuit, who back in the day, several decades ago, were exposed. So that was kind of the first book. This book's really about modern day. There's folks out there trying to clean up those, what you talked about, all that toxic waste buried in the ground. There is, it's no secret. You can go on the website and see that it's leaking into the dirt, and that is scary. To answer your question, they're trying to keep it from getting into the river, which would be a mess. And yeah, it's just it's a strange place, which seemed to me a great setting for a bunch of monster stories.
No, no. As I've said before, this is something you have in common. One of my short stories, that appears on CameronJournal.com, is called Windswept Waste. It's about the 1969 Rocky Flats fire. So
Okay.
Rocky Flats was they made nuclear arms. It was this facility in Colorado outside of Denver, which is now a natural park because it's been torn down and cleaned up, and the waste has been hauled to Wyoming. Um, and like I said, I just find there's a certain bit of a creepy vibe to the whole thing. Like, and from a literary kind of artistic perspective, it's very, let's put it this way. If you set something in that environment, in that world, half of your creepy vibe is built in. Like, you don't have to work to create it. It's just kind of already there.
Yeah,
This
working
is
in a
my
place where
thought.
you're in hazmat suits and gas masks and getting tested regularly for radiation. I mean, it's creepy. You're right.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And also, I mean, I think the some of the, machines and things as well, especially as they were in the 20th century, like glove boxes and things like that. The stuff is so frightening you can't even directly touch it. You have to use, all these tools to touch it, sort of thing. Adds a certain extra element of it as
Yeah.
well, I think. So, how is it writing a graphic novel again? What has changed in your process of writing a graphic novel between Witchland and Snitchland?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, like I said, I wrote all three of these. There's Witchland and there's Snitchland, and the third one will come out in February. It's done. It's called Twitchland, and that's a whole nother story based at this place. Um, I wrote them all as plays. The plays, one of them just went to New York and ran off Broadway. So the plays are doing well. But converting them to graphic novel, I love graphic novels. I love comics. And it just seemed like a dark, funny story that would lend itself well. So I'd say what's changed is, it's a real learning experience with the first one to take a story and a script that I've written there for the stage. I've also made a screenplay of it, but to turn it into graphic novel and figure out, how many frames per page and which pictures should be blown out and what are smaller and what's the right proportion there. I was just kind of fumbling my way through it with Witchland, and luckily it turned out well. And I also was taking a chance with this collaboration with the artist of Witchland. His name is Pyrink. He's from Mexico City, and he's great. So I think now with Snitchland, I was much more confident in the graphic novel process, and I learned, hey, this some of it has to do with the artwork, like this frame that you did, Pyrink, is awesome. This would lend itself well to a painting on the wall. So let's blow that out to a full page, and let's make this be smaller and this be smaller, and no words on this one. And for social media purposes, let's have some pictures with no words. And so I think I've kind of learned how to take the graphic novel format a lot better and make it look more effective on the page, but also be able to pull out frames and use it as freestanding storytelling, whether in social media or the website, whatever it might be. So it's just gotten a lot more fun, and I feel a lot more confident in it. And the third one was just a blast, because the third one, I just threw everything out there to make it be the craziest, scariest nuclear disaster, toxic waste vampire story I could come up with. So I made it. So that's the third story.
No, no, that's quite impressive. I don't know if we talked about this the last time, but it's probably worth reviewing. In terms of writing process, what gets you inspired?
Oh gosh, what gets me inspired? I think it was really. I took this on during COVID. I had never written creatively. I mean, I've been a fan of the genre of horror and comics and dark stories. I've been a fan forever. So it was really during COVID and quarantining that I decided I would use this time differently than maybe everyone did their own thing during that time. And mine was to try to create. And so my goal was just to finish something. And I think that once I pushed myself to finish Witchland and saw that the response to it was so positive, that was inspiring. So now it's inspiring for me just to come up with stories that will surprise people. Um, surprise and educate. Obviously, these are fictional stories, but they are based on a real place. And a lot of it have to do with things that are happening there now or happen in my life or my friends or family's life. So my goal is to write fun, creative, kind of slightly scary stories that entertain, and that's inspiring to me. It's inspiring to see the work be put to page, to see the beautiful artwork that Pyrink does for my stories, to hear people's responses when they read it. That just makes me want to do more. I mean, I started off writing one, and now I'm just inspired to keep going because people seem to really respond well to it, and that inspires me to be as creative and more, kind of pushing the boundaries more with each of the projects.
No, no, absolutely, absolutely. And then when you're doing things with theater off Broadway and all this type of thing, have you seen the show yet?
Oh yeah, I mean Witchland. The Witchland's the one that's kind of making the rounds. It before it was a graphic novel. It had a really successful run in San Diego, and then it ran in Palm Springs, and then the graphic novel came out, and then it just went to New York, and I was there for that whole run pretty much for several weeks in New York. And yeah, I've been there for a lot of the shows, and luckily I've been able to help collaborate, with the directors and the cast and the production. So, but yeah, I have seen it.
Yeah, what do you think is the biggest difference in a writing process between creating the graphic novel and creating a stage show?
Yeah, I'm what prompted all this was I love theater. I love live theater, and so when you write obviously a stage play or an immersive experience that's set in one room, then or a theater, then you have to really think creatively and how can you use either the stage to have different locations and different characters and different stories. What I've been trying to do is lean into the immersive part and say, don't just think of a theater as a stage, but think of a theater as just a location. So maybe the experience could start when you walk in the building and in the lobby, and then things are happening around you up and down the aisles. In San Diego, we have people grabbing your feet from your below the seats. I mean, so how can you get creative and scare people and be immersive and not have everything right in front of you? That's fine. We can. That's how some of the shows have been. But I think in writing
No,
it,
I love getting the cast out in the audience. That's one of
yeah,
my
me too.
favorite, when I
Yeah,
produce theater, that's one of my favorite things to do because
yeah.
it makes
Thank
it
you.
so much more immersive. Yeah.
Yeah, you have the aisles, obviously, but it depends on the state, on the facility. But some places might have a balcony or a place in the front of the theater where you can stage something or have a set up, up to the side. And so, I guess to answer your question, when I write that, I kind of think about that the whole time, like what's going to be doable for a theater company. Not going to have too many actors involved, not too many, because it's not many regional theaters may be able to afford to stage a giant, production. So how can I tell my Witchland and Snitchland story with my core cast of characters and get them out so they are in different rooms now and then, but do it in a way where it's not too elaborate, for a stage setting. So that's the challenge with writing a play. It's a fun challenge, and I've enjoyed it. When you take that play and convert it to a graphic novel, it opens the doors to whatever. This is where Pyrene comes in, and I can actually really visualize what it might look like out at Hanford and what these tanks that are buried in the ground, what they might look like, and or kind of my version of them. Again, this is a fictional account, but I can show different parts of the city, and then within maybe it's in a restaurant or it's down a dark street, and I can have aerial views going through the city. So it really just kind of opens up the boundaries. I still want to when I convert, from one to the other, I try to have the main core story is there. But I can get really creative with, I think, the number of people in the scenes, the location of the scenes. I can elaborate on the story quite a bit if I need to, or pull back. It just opens the door for more storytelling.
No, certainly. Now, I remember you'd mentioned that you had not really done a lot of writing before COVID. What was it about COVID that got you into writing creatively?
I mean, I've always liked writing, but I'm a human resources manager. I've been HR for years, and so before back in the day, I was a lawyer, and I liked the legal writing. I think I've always been good at writing, but not. I've never pushed myself to do it creatively. So, I just when COVID hit, and I realized, hey, this is going to be a long haul. I think of this quarantining. What are some things that I want to do at this time? Now that my kids were older and I had more time on my hands. And one was to write a stage play. And I had this idea for writing a really scary play because I feel like that's a genre that's kind of missing or lacking in live theater. And so that was what I did kind of the first year. And the second year, I wanted to write a cookbook. So I challenged myself and I wrote a cookbook. So it was just two things on my bucket list that I had inside of me. And I've been holding on to all these ideas. With writing Witchland, I mean, literally, that was my first one. It was really easy to put the story together because I lived it, and there was a witch that terrorized me out through high school. I had these stories. I know Hanford. I know the nuclear reactor. I used the main central characters as my partner and I and our daughter, so we kind of wrote about, I wrote, they say, write what you know. And I wrote what I knew. So, and so that's, I think what prompted me to do it during COVID. I didn't think I had the time and the drive before. You get so busy and caught up in day jobs and family life and parenting, and that it's hard to carve the time. Now that I've got the writing, bug, I'd say I carve the time as part of my life. Maybe I get up in the morning 2 hours earlier and I'll work before I go to work, or I work on the weekends, and you just make it work. And so I just never made the time before, and I never really pushed myself to do it before.
No, no, no. That's very important. That's, I think, one of the hardest when I, teach my writing courses. I talk about that. It's one of the hardest things. I even say, even for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I do this professionally. One of the struggles I have right now is carving out the time to write. And I have to, there's a lot of content to produce as well. And so it is definitely a struggle. My creative writing has definitely suffered these last couple years. So I'm starting to get out the calendar and start to build in writing blocks,
Yeah.
to have dedicated time for that. So that's very, 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 very important. So you finished this trilogy. What do you think you'll do next, or are you done?
Oh, I'm not done. So I finished writing this trilogy, but like you said, there's a lot of work in just getting these things staged and getting it out there and getting the PR and stuff like that. So I'm working on all that. I don't have a team. It's really myself. And, I've kind of put a kind of a scrappy group of helpers together to help me now. But to answer your question, earlier this year, I wrote another play, freestanding, not related to Witchland World at all, just based on a house here in San Diego that I know of that's pretty scary. My friends live there, and it's has some sort of other being living
Mm,
there. So I wrote a
mm.
play called Point Loma. That's the neighborhood that it's housed in. And actually, I'm just now getting that play out there, and that has now been confirmed for an off-Broadway run next May. So I'll be going back to New York with a new play called Point Loma. And then after that, I might probably go back to the Witchland world because I think there's some other stories to be told in there. It may not be part of that first trilogy with this family. It might be a whole different group. It might be a prequel back in the day when, Hanford started and the Downwinders, thing happened. And I don't know. I have a bunch of ideas of where I might go with it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fair. No, that's very good. One of the things I love about this story, and I think where we're getting is we're getting enough distance from the early atomic industry and the early Cold War. We're starting to get literature about it. And it takes time. You have to get a lot of distance from it to sort of have it all percolate through and all this type of thing. And I feel that my one of my family friends was a guy who had worked at Rocky Flats years ago, and it took them probably 20 years to sue the government to get money because this facility had been shut down. There was no corporation to sue. And unlike in Georgia and in Washington, there was someone to sue. Colorado, no one to sue. The guy got his payout of $250,000 2 days before he died. His daughter did very well. But it is, we're getting that distance now, so we can start talking about this stuff. Um, and that's definitely a world I would like to explore. I would like to explore more as well, especially the early days. And some of the interesting things that were done, which leads to my old joke, don't stand at the end of the runway at the St. Louis airport for too long. It's a toxic nuclear waste dump. You
Okay.
know, get on the plane and hope the plane leaves quickly. So um all sorts of interesting, things around that. So, are you reading? What are you reading right now?
Oh God, I'm always reading. I'm
This
reading.
is for all my writing students who
I
never read while they're
Well,
writing
I'm
to
reading a
show you
really.
need to
I'm
be reading.
reading actually this book. It's by David Robleski. He wrote the story of Edgar Sawtelle, which is one of my favorite books. This is his sequel. It's about 1,000 pages long, so it's taking me forever. But it's called
Mm,
Familiaris, and it's a beautiful book that I love a lot. That's kind of taken me all summer and now into the fall to get through because it's so long, but it's worth it because it's so good. I read a lot of new fiction. I also like if I can find ones that lean toward the horror genre that I like, I'll read those as well. But that's the one that I'm getting through right now. I just read uh, Demon Copperhead. I like that a lot. So there's I'm a big fan of devouring new fiction whenever I can.
yes, yes. I have not read a lot of fiction since I finished my MFA. I have been reading a lot of nonfiction. I'm reading a book on cities right now called Metropolis.
Oh, is it good?
Yes, which is very, very, very exciting. And yeah, but I definitely one of my projects for 2025 is I want to do more fiction reading and I want to get into graphic novels and whatnot. So, because I did some of that at the end of my MFA and I read there were some really good ones I read. And so I want to dig into that
It's
yeah,
two.
yes, I have to I know I have to go in order. I that's something I want to dig into a lot more because there's so many interesting stories being told in that medium. So
Yeah, I would
I'm
say graphic
excited.
novels were. I mean, I've always liked comics, and I like comic book movies, things like that. But actually reading graphic novels, I picked that up in the past couple of years, and I'm obsessed with it now. There's so many beautiful graphic novels out there. I like the way the stories are put together. I love the artwork. I mean, what was a
Yeah.
real big inspiration to me during the writing of these was this amazing To Kill a Mockingbird graphic novel that I
Yes.
found myself still going back to and thinking how beautiful the artwork is, how they took this story and put it into this format and a lot of quiet scenes, a lot of big scenes, use color, black and white. I think some people just really have got it dialed in, and that's exciting to me.
Yeah, yeah. I read a really great one from a Portuguese writer about a writer who the whole book is his lucid dreaming before death when he gets run over by a car.
Oh,
And I also read the graphic novel of George Takei's Family's Life in the Japanese internment camps,
oh
which
yeah,
was
yeah,
really good.
yeah.
Yeah. So I that got and I the very first one I ever read was Watchmen. That was the first time I'd ever picked up a graphic novel ever. And then I didn't until I was doing my MFA, and I'm kind of like, you know what? In my last semester, I want to get experimental. I want to go outside sort of the normal literary canon, and let's look at some other forms of storytelling. Um, and so and that was and I was kind of like, oh, there's a lot here. So that's my project for 2025 is to
Good.
read more graphic
Yeah,
novels.
well, that's a good project
So
to have.
yeah, yeah, that's my little reading project for next year. So now when you said that when it inspired you, what else has inspired you from, literary wise?
Well, I think, like I mentioned, my love of horror genre. I mean, I'm a big fan of you know scary movies. I wrote film review for a long time, and so I like some of the modern ones. I love like the Ari Aster movies like Hereditary and Midsommar. Those are inspiring to me because I like a scary movie, a scary story that's also really funny. And it's also, and the more it's told like a not a scary story, but like a drama that happens to have scary things happening around it, that inspires me. So I use some of those quite a bit with my work. So it's not just monsters and scares, but you're actually telling a family story. That's the main part of it. So Witchland, Snitchland, Twitchland, it tells the story of this family and navigating their way, through this situation, and yet scary things and obstacles are being thrown at them all the time. And that's what I try to do is keep the core characters and the core family at the heart of the story, and let them still be themselves and funny and have their quirks and make mistakes and fail. And then you have all this chaos and kind of terror going on all around them in this real life scary town. So those kind of stories that inspire me are the ones that really have a great script to them, a great story at the heart. And yeah, they might be really scary also,
Yes, yes. Well, see, this is another demonstration. You always have to worry about the quiet people who work in HR. They're always the ones who will come out with a crazy, scary, really good graphic novel, like yourself.
Yeah, it's funny. I like where I work right now. I kind of keep the graphic novels separate because I don't want to freak people out, So, yeah, it's you're right.
Yeah. No, I'd known a guy several years ago. I was very involved in the Colorado film scene, and there was this guy who wanted to film this quite disturbing movie. You'd never guess he'd write something like that, like at all. And I always laugh when like different people will come on the show and they look and sound exactly as you'd anticipate for what they do. No muss, no fuss. Like, yes, it all matches up. And then you get someone that's kind of like, oh, I would never anticipate the person who looks and sounds like that would write and make that. I find it endlessly entertaining just from a human. 'Cause I like to watch people. I always say my first job as a writer is to observe people. And just my observations of all the people that come through the show. And when I laugh with you because it's kind of like you'd never guess this guy would be the one.
Just 2 nights ago, I had a book signing, kind of a launch party for Snitchland because it just came out on the 29th.
Yeah.
So I had a party at a venue here in San Diego and invited a bunch of coworkers, and they had not seen the book, didn't know what it was about, and they're just like, "You wrote this? Who are you?"
Yeah.
So it was a kind of a funny juxtaposition there.
Yes, no, absolutely, absolutely. Well, excellent. Well, this is the part of the show where we do plugs and find out where we can buy the book and all this type of thing.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us where we can find you online and where to purchase?
Great. I mean, if you go to witchlandplay.com, all the information is there on the whole Witchland story, the Point Loma play. All my works is there, kind of backstory. Witchlandplay.com is you can buy the books from there. Witchland and Snitchland are both available, hardback, paperback, Kindle, from all avenues, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target.com. And, the plays are making their rounds. I will be announcing in the next week or so the New York show of the new play, Point Loma. Witchland's going to get a big run in Seattle next year that will be announced soon. Great. But the Witchland play website will tell you all of that. And also on social, on Facebook and Insta, I'm at Witchland Play.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Cameron. Thanks for having me. Yeah.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you.